Okay, so this morning we have it just listed up about sort of discussion of action plan, about setting national guidelines. So there's a few things that I wanted to talk to you about, a few more things that I wanted to get input on after hearing and seeing some of the conversations yesterday. So the plan generally for now for the preview of topics today, we're going to actually spend some time now recapping and thinking a little bit about guidelines in terms of core concepts. And then this afterwards, we're going to switch gears to a second part of what I envision the guidelines would be, in addition to the content and core concepts pieces, talking about employability skills and professional skills development. So we have 3 presentations relating to that and some discussion time coming with this. And then we're going to end today with some more detailed logistics stuff. And what that means is we'll spend the last hour of today talking about really who we are as a group, sort of what our real mission is, what our organizational structure will be, how we envision our partnerships working with other organizations. Do we need, establish some working groups? And I envision leaving here today with at least 2 working groups that I would like probably around 5 or 6 people at least who are interested in really working hard on developing the written guidelines in 2 areas, the core concepts piece and the professional development piece. So we're here trying to get buy-in and input from everyone, but the real work is going to happen probably over the next year to really craft and write up those files. So those are the 2 working groups that are going to be part of logistics. We're going to do some assignments with that later. But then also keep in mind, we would like some people who are interested in working on the HAPS learning outcomes and exam with D. And we would like people to help Jenny and Mary Pat with their projects too, piloting Leap Up questions, working on some of the core concepts work. And so those are sort of accessory projects that we're helping with our collaborators and partners. But in terms of the PMIG structural stuff, we'll have a formal working group on the 2 items related to the guidelines, and we'll ask you to sign up for that later today. And you're going to sign up. There's just a blank piece of paper I just came around and set up at the table. If you know at any time you're feeling inspired, if you would like to help Dee or Jenny or Mary Pat, if you'd like to be on the working groups, this is where you're going to put your name down at some point today if you're interested. So start with some recap about the core concepts, move into professional skills. We'll have some more discussion time, and then we'll end with some of the more structural things about the organization as a whole before we move forward. All right. So there's a couple things that came to mind to me from yesterday, and I'm going to put up a pretty comprehensive slide here, so bear with me. This is a summary slide that captures some of the ideas that I briefly presented yesterday that I had put up as a potential discussion for this group in the form of an editorial that I wrote about what we might do for guidelines. So this is a proposal that we're going to work through together and turn this on. All right. So the proposal was that this group, this newly formed group, PMIG, is going to be the responsible party for both creating and maintaining national/international programmatic curricular guidelines for physiology programs. And we have stakeholders in the room, and we're going to continue to get buy-in from them as well. And the partner organizations so far that have expressed interest, APS, HAPS, and ACDP. So we want to be sure to have buy-in there. The maintenance of this is important to me. I don't see this as a static document. I don't see this as a one-time deal. Like I said, this group has already is already planning a 2019 and 2020 meetings. 2019 in Minnesota, 2020 in Oregon, and so we do have some work to do. And I see that we would always be working on updating and maintaining these documents going forward. But the first part we talked about yesterday is we would ground our curricular guidelines in the core concepts. So defining what those are, there's been a lot of publications in a book already. We talked a bit about that. And the other part of this would be how and where we fit that in. So Claudia talked about with her potential rubric that we could use to collect data about core concepts that we're already doing. Where are we actually teaching those concepts? Is it only in our physiology header courses? Are we expecting that to come from intro bio or biochemistry? What do those programs have for their guidelines too? But I want to talk much more about this part here. But just to fill this out by the end of today, We're also going to be working through the talks by Julia and Jen and Michelle and I about also part 2 of what I envisioned the guidelines would include would be skills and competencies. So these would be practical skill development, career experiences, research experiences, career exploration, those kinds of things. And so we're going to have a series of presentations and discussion about that and how we might include that as a best practice for guidelines for programs. And then those 2 things that I just mentioned would be the 2 task force groups that I mentioned. So we want a group of people that are really interested on developing those over the next year with us, and we would ask for you to work on those and sign up if you're interested. The part that would be easier enough for the committee to do, and we've already started, and that's to compile and maintain a set of resource papers and where to find good information. So the PMIG website now has a resource tab that I mentioned yesterday, and we have loaded up there the Vision and Change document, some of the national guidelines, some of Jenny and Joel's papers, the papers that PMIG has authored already, the meeting report from last year, contact information for getting the FISMAPS exam, contact information to be part of the Leap Up assessment program. Like we as the committee are just kind of working on compiling and maintaining those resources. So we're definitely looking for suggestions about good things to put up there. So we'll be working on that, and I consider that part of this comprehensive proposal. We are also thinking about how do we do self-assessments. So within our departments, so the rubric that Claudia presented yesterday, the Pulse community rubrics that are available that Jenny mentioned to, in addition to the Pulse Ambassador program, and we actually have a Pulse Ambassador person coming at lunch, so we'll have a table. Jenny and Lisa are going to sit together if you want to learn about that program. We're for doing the external reviews. And with this, in a second, I want to show you a model for what the American Kinesiology Association has done, and they're a very, very similar organization to us, and they're about a year ahead of us in terms of their curricular guidelines and things like that. So I'm going to show you that they've created a pretty simple website where they have these documents, self-assessment documents and rubrics freely available to members of their community, and I think that would be a potential way for us to move forward. And then something, lastly, I put here, we haven't hit on this much at all, but I know we have a couple people that are deep into advising and dedicated advisors here in the room, and many of us who are doing informal advising. I would love to see added to our website and added to some of the topics at our conferences, some general advising guidelines. And I mentioned already the couple advising professional societies that have conferences. They have some resources online. So I want to, well, at least at minimal, we'll put links to some of those external organizations so you can find them. But I'm thinking that the advising piece is a really important part of this puzzle, making sure we are able to do it well, if we're the ones who are expected to do it. Is that something that we suggest in our guidelines, that there's a trained, dedicated professional advisor in your unit or on campus that your students are going to? Is it a best practice that we need a dedicated pre-health advisor that's up to speed on changing MCAT requirements and different regulation or different admission requirements at schools? So this is pretty comprehensive. And again, I see this as more of a 1 to 2 year plan. The advising piece is what we have not tackled very much yet. The other stuff we're starting to work our way through. So before I get too far down the road, this would be a time to get some feedback from you if this represents everything that we really need to think about that would be included in guidelines. Is this too much to tackle all at once? I just wanted to give a second for you to reflect and see if this is aligned with the vision of the group right now at this point.
One thing that occurs to me is how best to promote physiology programs. Mm-hmm. I've had some discussions with people around already. Mm-hmm. High school seniors don't really understand what physiology is.
Yeah.
And so I was hoping to come here and hear more about how other people are approaching that. So I don't know if that's something that might become part of this proposal or not. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is in terms of getting your high school students who are coming in as freshmen to know about the program, getting those students that are at orientation to pick your program amongst others or stay in it.
Perhaps it's not something that's necessarily pushed to incoming freshmen, it could be that it has to happen during the freshman year as students learn a little bit more about the different disciplines within biology and understand what physiology is. So there's particular approaches that could be taken, and it's not necessarily just to incoming freshmen.
What about something on the PMIG website? If we have resources.
Hold on, Jen.
Sorry. I just assume everybody can hear me. If we have resources for teaching physiology, learning physiology, academic advising, why not just a little student tab that gives the broad picture? Here's what a physiology major is. Here's potential careers associated with the physiology degree, especially with the website being physiologymajors.org.
Right.
If they do a Google search, what is a physiologist? That's something that might pop up. So,
Okay. That's a great idea. So actually, in my slides later, I actually have a Google page search where I did physiology majors and careers and see what comes up, and that's a gap that I think we can fill for sure.
One of
PBS does all of this stuff already, right? So let's Jessica talk.
So PBS has some stuff, but they don't, well, I have not been able to find that.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to apologize up front for the website. It stinks. It's getting an overhaul. APS does do a lot of what is a physiologist. The career pages are differently based now. They used to be based on educational level, and they're not anymore. But if you go to the LifeSci TRC, which is our online digital library, we have a lot of physiology information, including native physiologists from different career paths, from different backgrounds, from different anything you can imagine, and they're written at different grade levels. And if you're interested in knowing where they are, I can show you.
If I could just get back to you, now it's been at least a year or so since I looked. Some things might have changed, but my impression when I went to look at what is a physiologist and so forth, it was very research-centric. And if you were not interested in becoming a physiological research scientist, it didn't look like you.
can you talk about career cards
Yeah.
and stuff offline?
Sure.
Yeah. So I am an APS person through and through. I've been on the education committee and working through this, and I have to give my honest feedback is the students are sharing this feedback with us. That is the honest truth. And I know the career cards, we give them out, we give them at Fun Day and stuff, but it is still a research heavy piece. And we're looking at less than 5% of our students are kind of tracking that way. And so I think that there is probably room somewhere in one of those places to expand a little bit. That would be my honest feedback.
I agree. It
Yeah.
completely needs to expand. There needs to be other tracks available. If you'll write it down, it helps.
Yeah, great.
Stop electing research-centric presidents and counselors.
Yeah.
So that we get somebody on council that understands how to spell education.
Yeah. So also leveraging stuff that's already being done.
I just said, Ron's on it.
Yeah. So Jeff mentioned yesterday the PCOP blog, and I just was showing it to Kelly, saying, there's not one here on best practices for advising for physiology. So maybe somebody maybe the person sitting next to me could put a PCOP blog up, because I think that we need that. And it's not like people are commenting a lot on those blogs, but at least it's there, then I would know to go to it. Other people might know to go to it, but starting that thread would be
Could you
good.
explain a little bit about PCOP? Yeah, I'm not sure everyone.
So PCOP was an incubator RCN UBE grant that was written mostly by Marcia, but a little bit by Barb and I, to bring people to the first APS ITL and form. And so we called it the Physiology Educators Community of Practice. So people from underrepresented colleges, minority serving colleges, and community colleges were funded to come to the first ITL using that grant. And the blog was one of the things that started from that. It's also housed through the Life Science TRC. And I just was looking at Jeff's because he mentioned he did one. So the blogs are on different things. I think Mary Pat and I did one a few years ago on communities of practice, local communities of practice. But it's a nice repository. It's not a lot of discussion on it, but it's someplace to put something like this. There's nothing on it about advising to physiology right now, and that's a big hole. But I think using resources we already have is a good thing.
Go ahead.
So my concern, and I think I told this to you at EB, which is calling this physiology majors interest group, because I think people look at that and they go, oh, we've just got a physiology course. I don't belong. Yeah, and
Actually, can I just say,
Well, and the
we
community-
put this in an acronym generator, undergraduate physiology, all these different words, and my favorite one that came out was UPIG, undergraduate physiology interest group. Yeah, we can always go back to that.
But you've also got the community colleges where there's a lot of physiology being taught at the undergraduate level that people are going to feel excluded if it says physiology majors. But if we're developing course guidelines and such, I think there's got to be some way to be more inclusive.
Yeah, and I know this has come up a lot in terms of what it speaks to me is that there is definitely a need for this kind of a conversation taking place. And I think when we initially started, like we were thinking like the big gap was nothing on program level guidelines. There's a smattering of things for courses here and there. There's conferences where people are talking about teaching, but there wasn't anybody doing like bona fide full scale bachelor's degree program kind of guidelines. And so that's where we started here. I mean, I'm sure the stuff that we're talking about is certainly informative to all those other groups too. And that's part of the thing I want to talk about more extensively too later today is exactly how, then do we just join like with the HAPS meeting where everyone's already talking about those kind of courses, or how do we really structure that?
An interest group, when I first heard that, that's a small thing. And I didn't want it to be small.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Right, Colin, and I I can totally agree with you on figuring out acronyms and that whole issue. It's what you're going to name, whatever.
Yeah.
But an interest group is like in SABRE, we have these little small interest groups that are part of SABRE, but we want to be bigger than that, right? And I agree definitely with Dee that it needs to be physiology. So over beers tonight, we just have to figure out a better acronym and a name, and that PEG. Okay, no.
So,
Matthew was next.
So what about outreach? One of the things that our graduate program of physiological sciences here is trying to do is to create a new committee for graduate students to work in that is specifically a community outreach group where we go into different parts of the community, into middle schools, high schools, even elementary schools if the opportunity arises, or show face at various events in Tucson, like the Tucson Meet Yourself. And we can put on different presentations of physiology. But I think that what you guys, the critique that I'd give for optimizing a website and for putting all of this information out there on the website is that, okay, that's great. What student is going to know to look up the American Physiological Society or the Physiology Majors Interest Group? Virtually none of them. I didn't figure out what that was until 7 years into physiology. So it's great. But just putting the information out there and hoping that other people are going to access it, I don't think is effective. I haven't found it effective. And I don't know what you guys think about that. I feel like actually interacting with people is where you get the most effect.
So just to go along with that, though, I think from a recruitment standpoint that it could be of benefit for this group to provide some key information, because I don't know about your universities, but I know if I'm sharing something with my students, it has to be branded appropriately anyway. So it's not that this group can create some one pager that then we can all distribute. And I don't think that would be ideal, but I do think there are some key things that rather than all of us recreating the wheel on our own department and program websites over and over again about possibilities and statistics of how many programs in the rise, that it could make sense as a resource page to provide that for our membership, if we have members, to then be able to go back and take some of that to create our own one-page sheets that we pass out at open houses at our institution or put on our own website that could link back to it. But I agree, I don't think people are going to stumble upon it on their own necessarily, but if this group could help provide clarity so that then at our own institutions, we are sort of using a shared vocabulary, I personally think that would be helpful.
It also brings to mind too, like the purpose of the website. Like right now, the website was just kind of convenient for us to be like, hey, we're having a meeting. Here's some files, and is that really the place where we're going to do outreach directly for students? Is it a student resource site or is it a faculty resource site? Is it both? That's something that we'll have to say, like chances are we probably need some sort of website committee or something too, to help kind of work on some of those issues.
Couple of points that I don't have any specific opinion one direction or another, but Ron brought this up to me yesterday. In that, and we've talked a little bit about this, about where's physiology going in terms of medical school, and it's probably crawling into the woodwork somewhere. And things are becoming biomedical sciences departments. They're becoming, things are being merged down because, as Nick talked about yesterday, this is what dean makes life easier for deans. So Ron wanted me to make the point that undergraduate programs, however they're deemed, whether they're majors or they're, as Dee says, teaching a random course in physiology here or there, this is going to become the brand name of physiology. And I think Ron is right. I mean, this is where the word physiology is going to morph. That's where it's going to migrate to. And I think that's very important as we're talking about this message that we want to send, that we keep that in mind. The second piece in terms of the APS that I think everyone needs to bear in mind is the term interest group. So when you talk to council and you talk to the people at APS, the term interest group puts you in an immediate box. All right. Yeah. There's the hypoxia interest group. There's the epithelial transport interest group. There's and they're interest groups, and they're and when it comes to joint programming within APS, a lot of groups that are cross-sectional within APS that are not just respiratory, they're not just cell, they're not just cardiovascular, et cetera. They've been across lots of disciplines. So the PMIG group is coming out of sort of the teaching section, right? But it's going to be a unit. Probably, if you say interest group, if interest group is in the name, it's going to be labeled within council and within APS as a small component of the teaching section. A peripheral, right? It's a small peripheral component, and some groups of physiologists have formed their interest group so that they get more symposia at EB. That's clearly not the goal here, right? I mean, I don't think that's what anyone here is talking about. So I just make these comments so that when we think about the term interest group, you understand what that's going to project in terms of the APS.
Okay, go ahead.
I think that we need to be thinking more broadly into something like Society for Undergraduate Physiology Education that would appeal widely. Okay. And one of the things that HAPS did very effectively when they were starting is they partnered with the publishers of the books that are being used in the courses, and they had flyers, and they got the publishers with their reps going into different institutions to have flyers about, oh, do you know about HAPS? Well, here's a flyer about HAPS, and here's how you can find out more, and here's the website, and that then drives people to the website. So something to keep in mind.
Okay, no, good, thanks.
So I'm just going to riff off of that, and I'm looking at I'm like a student cheating. I'm looking at Julia's notes here. So she's come up with the acronym SUPER. So it would be Society for Undergraduate Physiology Education and Research. SUPER.
Oh, okay. Jeff did that just at the same time. Yes. So two people in the room, same thing.
That's better than you, Pig.
Or Pugs. Pugs was another one. Yeah.
Oh, Pugs, yeah.
I kind of like Pugs.
Yeah, physiology undergraduate, or what would be it? Yeah, undergraduate something, yeah.
Society or
something. Okay. All right. This is great feedback. What else?
Okay, Nancy.
For careers, it would be great if we could list the skills that students need for those careers so they can go back to their faculty and say, hey, I need this skill. We should teach that.
Yeah. So Julia's going to talk a little bit about that maybe. Yeah, later today.
And that will be part of one of the working groups that we should
absolutely.
develop, which is great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I would just make a quick point that anatomy camps and now physiology camps at our institution are unbelievably popular for high school kids. It brings a lot of money in. Unfortunately, I think it should be less charged to the parents and the kids, but that is, to Terry's point, for recruitment into physiology and anatomy.
So how long is a camp?
1 week, and what Kelly and I can't figure out, it used to be 2 sections for 1 week, but the people running it were so exhausted, they said we can only do it for 1 week. So we got 90 kids that applied, we could only take 30. So 60 didn't get what they needed. $1,400 a week.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, Julia.
We were talking about this morning. It would be nice to have something that relates to what I call academic promotion, but you would call faculty promotion. So we're all physiology teachers or physiology educators. How can we support each other and drive tenure track teaching positions and support that pathway? I think that's actually really important. And I'm not quite sure how it works here still, but
I don't think we know how it works here yet.
maybe you can drive the process.
No, I mean, but that's actually really, I mean, that kind of stuff, where also those discussions really happening, right? I don't know if anyone, like folks who are in positions like that, like I don't know, Nancy, Jenny, like people who are doing like tenure stream positions in teaching, like anyone have any comments on that?
Yeah, so I just want to plug back into the super idea but changing the name may have an influence on how this group is perceived within APS, but also for senior appointments committees at universities. So if you say you presented your poster at the PMIG conference or the PMIG meeting, is different than the Society for Undergraduate Physiology Education and Research, and you presented or you participated, and it has a lot more weight, and I think that as part of the faculty development is really important, super important.
Super.
I like that.
So I'll give you a quick overview of how the University of California has been addressing this. There's this longstanding line called the lecturers with potential security of employment. It's the rough equivalent of an assistant professor, and then you lose the word potential when you become an associate. And then senior lecturer is the equivalent to full professor. We are expected to have roughly 70% of our tenure based on teaching, about 20% what they just call scholarship, so that includes education research. It can be research in your home field that you originally came from before you transitioned into teaching, and then, of course, service. Historically, it hasn't been used very widely, but when the California budget went into the toilet in 2008, it was revived. And they got rid of a lot of the Unit 18 lecturers who were adjuncts and replaced them with us, the tenure track lecturer series. And in Irvine and San Diego, it's been the most expanded. So there are a lot of us. I was part of a cohort of 5, and all of us just got tenure last month. So yay! So it's expanded in the University of California. So if anyone wants, I can send you the pages from our academic personnel manual that specify the responsibilities of this position compared to a research faculty.
Right, and so I don't think Nick was able to be here now, but this actually briefly came up when I was presenting this work with the Association of Chairs of Departments of Physiology, and the chairs were actually asking like for other models of that and how that's working, because these types of positions are becoming more common. I mean, really dedicated, really hardworking people in those roles who deserve, promotion and job security and things like that, and that was really being recognized. So that might be, oh, there you are. I didn't know if you were here this morning. I was like, go ahead, go.
So we're petitioning the University of California to change our titles to assistant professor of teaching, associate professor of teaching.
Yeah.
And we're not considered ladder-ranked faculty, and so we don't have some privileges as the research faculty. So we don't get sabbatical. We're not supposed to serve on the promotion committees, even though that's the committee that determines our fate. So it does have some issues.
Okay, yeah, go.
So I feel very passionately about the notion that people who are involved in education should have a strong and a stable and a reliable career path. But the practicalities of the matter are that I think you just need to be very cautious. You also need to be aware of, if we say, well, if there are a fixed number, for instance, of academic slots in an institution, and you say, we want these academic slots to go to the teaching group, then some people on the research side may say, wow, we're going to push back hard against this, because what you're taking is you're diminishing the number of slots for research, teaching, and service. I think you have to step back and you have to broadly look at your institution or your group within the institution and say, what are we here for? What is our primary purpose? In my department, we thought a lot about this. We teach a lot of students, but I'll be honest that the primary purpose of our department, as agreed on by most of us, is that we are a research department that teaches, not a teaching department that does some research. And I think when I first came to our department, there was a great deal of difference between the role of teaching faculty and the role of tenure-track faculty. And there was a perceptual difference, there were some practical differences, and I think it's to the benefit of the group that we diminished that and mixed it up a little bit. I think that developing tracks of the assistant, associate, full professor for a scholar educator, as we did, was important. They're not tenured. And, that reflects another level of conversation. If we were to propose that they be tenured, we'd have to fight a different battle. I think we needed to get them approved and valued before you get to that stage. One day they will be tenured, but before they get to that point, you have to say, look how valuable these people are. We cannot live without them. It's a defined value. I think you've got to define your role as a group, and define your role within that group, and define you're absolutely necessary before you ask for what might be seen as a bigger piece of the pie that diminishes somebody else's.
So I think that, along those same lines, our university just went through the process of adding new faculty appointments and ranks. I do think that the information sharing is something that this group, whatever it's called, can do and facilitate. Even just finding faculty handbooks from other universities can be a really arduous task. So if there's a resource section on a website, or if we all just sort of agree that on the listserv we're going to be active, and so if someone says, hey, I'm trying to have this discussion at my university, do you mind sharing what your potential faculty ranks are, that could actually be, that the community aspect of all of us here could be really valuable. And along those lines, I think that formalized mentorship relationships could also be something that this group facilitates. I know that I'm part of the advisors for health professions, and I had a mentor there, and that's actually been a really valuable relationship to have a phone call every 3 months with someone who's been doing this for 35 years. And I think that in the realm of physiology education, that if there was interest, that might also be valuable for this group to facilitate some formalized mentorship relationships because I think that based on my experience at these meetings, our conversations are what's really helping all of us. And that could facilitate that, because I think there are so many institutional department specific things that there's no way that this group could probably take the lead in saying, here's how you should organize it. But if it's, here's an opportunity for people to share how it's organized at their institution or for their position, so that then when you're working on it in your specific world, you have that information at hand, that could be valuable.
So I just wanted to add the perspective on the research versus teaching. And if you are selecting teachers, you're pulling away from FTE slots that could go to researchers. And what I'm seeing a lot of at this group, and I know what UBC has developed a professor of teaching stream, is that research in teaching and learning is bona fide research. When you're conducting peer-reviewed, evidence-based research in the teaching area, you're not doing research. And faculty members who are focusing their research efforts on the scholarly activities into teaching want to avoid the situation where we're putting more value on one type of research over another type of research. And so if you look, and I can be happy to share the UBC criteria for promotion through the professor of teaching ranks, but it's paralleled exactly to the bench research, traditional science research, and it requires evidence-based approaches to generating data and generating new knowledge, and you have to demonstrate impact outside of your classroom, international impact, and so on. So I just want to make sure that what we're not doing is saying one type of research is more important than another type, but that there is bona fide research in this area as well.